When I watched my fiancé sleeping with my sister, in my bed, the night before our wedding. I played that video for 500 guests, with a smile. And trust me, nobody saw the ending coming. The morning sun spilled through the sheer curtains of my penthouse, painting the marble floors in gold. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping black coffee, watching the city below stir to life. Tomorrow was the day I would marry Daniel Ashford, the man who had spent the last 2 years convincing me he was worthy of my name, my fortune, and my trust. The penthouse was quiet, save for the distant hum of the espresso machine as my assistant, Lena, prepared her own cup. She was already dressed in her usual sharp blazer and slacks, her tablet in hand, scrolling through the final checklist for the wedding. Floral arrangements confirmed, catering taste tested, seating chart triple-checked, she recited, her voice dry. Honestly, Evelyn, if this wedding doesn't go perfectly, it won't be for lack of preparation. I smirked. Perfection is the bare minimum. Lena rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She knew me well enough by now. My phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. I frowned, swiping it open. Unknown. You deserve to know the truth. Attached was a video file. I stared at it, my fingers hovering. A prank? A disgruntled ex of Daniel's? He'd had a few before me, though none serious enough to warrant sabotage. Lena glanced over. Problem? Probably nothing. I tapped the video. The screen filled with a dimly lit bedroom. My bedroom. The one in my Hamptons estate. And there, tangled in my silk sheets, was Daniel. And beneath him, her golden hair fanned across the pillows, was my sister, Clarissa. The audio was muffled, but I didn't need to hear the words. The way his hands gripped her waist, the way she arched into him, there was no mistaking what this was. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. Lena jumped. Evelyn. I didn't answer. My pulse was steady. My breathing even. The cold, calculating part of my brain had already taken over, shoving the initial shock into a locked box. This changed everything. But first I needed to be sure. I forwarded the video to my private investigator with a single instruction. Verify authenticity. No. Then I turned to Lena. Cancel my morning meetings. She blinked. You have the final dress fitting in an hour. Reschedule it. I strode toward my office. And call my father. Tell him I need to see him. Lena hesitated, her eyes flicking to the broken porcelain at my feet. Evelyn, what's going on? I paused at the door, my voice icy. A change of plans. Clarissa sat at the quaint cafe down the street from her apartment, stirring her latte absently. She'd been distant lately, more so than usual. Even her best friend Naomi had noticed. You've been weird all week, Naomi said, stealing a bite of Clarissa's croissant. Wedding jitters? Clarissa forced a laugh. Why would I have wedding jitters? I'm not the one getting married. But your sister is. Naomi shrugged. Big day for the family. Plus you're the maid of honor. That's pressure. Clarissa's fingers tightened around her cup. Yeah. Pressure. Naomi studied her. You okay? Fine. She checked her phone. No messages. Daniel had promised to text her today, but nothing yet. Maybe he was busy with last-minute preparations. Or maybe he was having second thoughts. Her stomach twisted. She shouldn't have done it. One stupid night, too much wine, and the way he'd looked at her, like she was the one he really wanted. Not Evelyn. Never Evelyn. But now with the wedding tomorrow. Clarissa. Naomi waved a hand in front of her face. You're zoning out. She shook her head. Sorry. Just tired. Naomi grinned. Well, perk up. Tonight's the rehearsal dinner. You'll finally get to see the infamous Evelyn Sinclair in full bridezilla mode. Clarissa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Can't wait. Daniel adjusted his tie in the mirror of his hotel suite. He'd spent the morning running last-minute errands, picking up his tailored tux, confirming the honeymoon itinerary, and most importantly making sure Clarissa kept her mouth shut. His phone buzzed. A text from her. Clarissa, we need to talk. He exhaled sharply. Not now. Not when everything was finally falling into place. Evelyn was the perfect match. Beautiful, brilliant, and loaded. The Sinclair name alone would open doors his family's modest wealth never could. And Clarissa? She'd been a mistake. A reckless, impulsive mistake. He typed back. Daniel, not today. We'll talk after the wedding. He hesitated, then added, Daniel, you promised. No reply. Daniel pocketed his phone. Everything would be fine. Clarissa wouldn't ruin this. She loved him, or at least she thought she did. And by the time she realized he had no intention of leaving Evelyn, it would be too late. The hum of my private investigator's laptop filled the silence of my office. Marcus Lynn was the best in the business. Discreet, thorough, and expensive. He didn't ask questions when I forwarded him the video. He just got to work. Now his dark eyes flicked between the screen and me, his expression unreadable. It's real. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. No chance of manipulation? None. The metadata checks out. The footage hasn't been edited. He paused. It was taken 2 weeks ago. At your Hamptons estate, like you thought. 2 weeks. Daniel had been inside me 2 days after that. My stomach turned, but my face remained impassive. Who sent it? Marcus shook his head. Untraceable. Burner number routed through multiple proxies. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. I nodded. Keep digging. He hesitated. Evelyn, what are you going to do? I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant one. My job. Clarissa stood in front of the floor-length mirror in her maid of honor dress, a pale gold sheath that hugged her curves. She looked beautiful. It made her sick. Naomi whistled from the doorway. Damn. You ready? The car's here. Clarissa checked her phone again. Still nothing from Daniel. Coward. She slipped her phone into her clutch and forced a smile. Let's go. The ballroom of the Sinclair Grand glittered under crystal chandeliers. 400 guests would be here tomorrow, but tonight was just family and the wedding party, close enough to make an impact, small enough to control. I stood near the entrance, greeting arrivals with a flawless smile. My father, Robert Sinclair, lingered nearby, his sharp gaze missing nothing. He knew something was wrong. I hadn't told him about the video yet, just that we needed to talk. Then Daniel arrived. He looked every inch the perfect groom, tall, handsome, his smile warm as he crossed the room toward me. His hands found my waist, his lips brushing my cheek. You look stunning. I let him kiss me. Let him think everything was fine. You're late, I murmured. He chuckled. Last-minute tux adjustments. You know how it is. I did. I also knew he'd been at a hotel bar 20 minutes ago, texting Clarissa. Speaking of, my sister stepped into the ballroom, her gaze flicking nervously between me and Daniel. I disentangled myself from him. Excuse me. I need to speak to my sister. Daniel's smile tightened, but he nodded. I crossed the room, my heels clicking against the marble. Clarissa stiffened as I approached. Evelyn. Her voice was too bright. Everything looks amazing. I studied her, the way her fingers twisted the strap of her clutch, the slight tremor in her smile. Guilt looked good on her. Does it? I tilted my head. Funny. I've been getting the feeling something's off about this wedding. Her throat bobbed. What do you mean? I leaned in, lowering my voice. Tell me, Clarissa. If you knew something big, about the person I'm marrying, would you keep it from me? Her face paled. Before she could answer, my father's voice cut through the room. Evelyn. A word. I stepped back, smiling sweetly. We'll talk later. I didn't sleep that night. I fed my father about everything and the plans forward. He was furious, not on Daniel but Clarissa. The video played on a loop in my mind. Daniel's hands on my sister, her breathless laughter, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. Every frame was etched behind my eyelids. I sat at my desk as dawn bled into the sky, Marcus's report open in front of me. The video was real. The timestamp matched a weekend when Clarissa had dropped by the Hamptons estate while I was in Paris. Daniel had told me he was in meetings. Why? My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Daniel, can't wait to see you today. One more day until you're my wife. I stared at it. Then typed back. Me, I've been waiting for this my whole life. No lies detected. Clarissa hadn't slept either. She paced her apartment, gnawing at her thumbnail. Daniel hadn't answered her last text. The rehearsal dinner had been torture. Evelyn's eyes lingering on her too long, her father's sharp glances, the way Daniel had avoided her all night. She knows. The thought slithered through her mind. Her phone rang. She lunged for it, but it was just Naomi. You ready for the big day? Naomi chirped. Clarissa's laugh was brittle. Yeah. So ready. You sound weird. Just tired. She hesitated. Hey, if you found out someone you loved was hiding something huge, would you confront them? Naomi snorted. Depends. Are we talking hid the last slice of pizza, or secret second family? Clarissa's stomach twisted. Something in between. Then yeah. Rip off the bandage. Clarissa exhaled. Maybe she should tell Evelyn. Maybe it wasn't too late. I stood in front of the mirror watching the stylist weave diamonds into my updo. The wedding dress, custom Vera Wang, ivory silk with a cathedral train, fit like it had been made for revenge. Lena strode in, her tablet in hand. Final head count is 517. The AV team confirmed the screens are synced. And your father wants to know if you're sure about this. I met her eyes in the mirror. Tell him I've never been more sure of anything. She hesitated. And Daniel? I smiled. What about him? Daniel adjusted his cufflinks in the groomsmen's suite, his reflection smug in the floor-length mirror. His best man Chris clapped him on the shoulder. Last hours of freedom, man. Daniel smirked. Trust me, marriage to Evelyn Sinclair is anything but a prison. Chris whistled. The money, the connections, you hit the jackpot. Daniel's phone buzzed. Another message from Clarissa. Clarissa, we need to talk. No. He deleted it. After today it wouldn't matter. The cathedral was packed. 500 guests in their finest silks and suits, the air thick with perfume and whispered anticipation. The Sinclairs didn't just have a wedding, they had an event. I stood at the back, my father's arm looped through mine. The orchestra swelled. The doors opened. And I walked. Every step was measured. Every breath controlled. I could see Daniel at the altar, his smile beatific. Clarissa stood to the side, her hands shaking around her bouquet. The priest began speaking. Daniel reached for my hand. I let him take it. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and this congregation to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. His eyes twinkled as he glanced at the crowd. If anyone present knows of any reason why these two should not be united, speak now. A beat. The cathedral held its breath. Or forever hold your peace. Silence. Then I turned to the crowd and said, before we begin, there's something you all should see. I raised the remote in my free hand. Daniel's smile faltered. I pressed play. The moment the screen flickered to life, the entire cathedral fell into a silence so deep I could hear the rustle of silk as guests leaned forward. Then the gasp started. The video was crystal clear. Daniel's back, the curve of Clarissa's bare shoulder, the unmistakable sounds of their betrayal echoing through the sacred space. The camera angle showed the Hamptons estate's master bedroom in perfect detail, right down to the Picasso hanging above the headboard. I didn't watch. I already knew every frame by heart. Dad, I watched them. Daniel's grip on my hand turned bone-crushing. His face drained of color, his mouth working soundlessly like a fish yanked from water. Clarissa made a small wounded noise. Her bouquet hit the floor with a muffled thud, roses scattering across the altar steps. Then the screaming started. Aunt Margaret fainted straight into the lap of the French ambassador. My father's business partner, Charles Whitmore, choked on his champagne, spraying the front row. In the third pew, Naomi, Clarissa's best friend, let out a strangled, "What the fuck?" loud enough to echo. But the best reaction? Daniel's mother. The esteemed Victoria Ashford, who had spent the last 6 months lecturing me on proper wifely decorum, made a noise like a teakettle boiling over before her eyes rolled back in her head. Daniel finally found his voice. Evelyn, this isn't, I can explain. I tilted my head. Can you? Behind us, Clarissa was hyperventilating. Oh God. Oh God. I turned to her slowly. You look ill, sister. Was the guilt too heavy to carry? She flinched like I'd struck her. Tears streaked her perfectly contoured cheeks. I never meant, it just happened. Daniel made a desperate grab for my arm. Baby, please, it was one mistake. She came on to me. Clarissa's head snapped up. What? You lying? I held up a hand. They both fell silent. 500 people held their breath. I reached into my bodice and pulled out a second remote. Daniel's eyes tracked it like a grenade. What are you doing? I smiled. Showing the rest. I pressed play. The screen changed to a hotel security feed. Daniel 2 nights ago, slipping into a room with a brunette who was decidedly not Clarissa. Then another clip. And another. A montage of his exploits played out in high definition, each time stamped, each location meticulously labeled. The final shot was from last night. Daniel at the hotel bar whispering to a waitress while texting Clarissa. After the wedding we'll figure this out. The cathedral erupted. Daniel dropped to his knees. Actual tears streaked down his face. Evelyn, I was scared. I panicked about getting married and I crouched until we were eye level. You should have been scared of me. His breath hitched. Behind him, Clarissa was sobbing uncontrollably, snot dripping down her chin. Please, I'll do anything, just don't. I stood, brushing imaginary dust from my gown. The prenup is voided. The Ashford shares in the Sinclair merger are forfeit. And Clarissa? I glanced at her. Mom's trust fund just got donated to the shelter where you volunteer. Hope you like minimum wage. My father stood, smoothing his tie. I believe that concludes today's events. The guests erupted into chaos. And I walked back down the aisle, alone, to the sound of Daniel's screaming apologies and Clarissa's wails. The car door closed behind me with a satisfying thud, sealing me away from the chaos of the cathedral. My driver Marcel didn't ask questions, he'd been with the family long enough to know when silence was required. As we pulled away, I watched through tinted windows as the first reporters arrived, drawn like vultures to fresh carnage. Lena was already typing furiously on her tablet. Press release is ready. Social media team is standing by. Your father's lawyers have already frozen all of Daniel's assets tied to the merger. I leaned back against the leather seats, finally letting my mask slip just enough to savor the moment. How long until it trends? She smirked. It already is. Naomi's hands shook as she scrolled through her phone in the cathedral bathroom stall. #ScornSinclair was already exploding. Someone had live-streamed the entire disaster and the internet was feasting. Memes of Daniel's horrified face were circulating. A gossip site had already dug up his Tinder profile from 2 years ago with the bio, looking for my future ex-wife's trust fund. But the real dagger? The official Sinclair Group statement. The Sinclair-Ashford merger has been terminated effective immediately. All shares will be reabsorbed by Sinclair Holdings. We wish Mr. Ashford the best in his future endeavors. Attached was a screenshot of Daniel's empty bank account. Naomi texted Clarissa. You need to get out of there. Now. No response. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Standing in the now empty vestry, he stared at the notifications flooding his screen. Bank alert. $0 available balance. Credit card declined. Ashford Capital. Emergency board meeting called. His mother's call came through. He answered with shaking hands. Mother, I can explain dash. You stupid boy, Victoria Ashford hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? The board is voting me out as we speak. Our family name is ruined. The line went dead. Across the room his best man Chris slowly removed his boutonniere. My firm can't be associated with this. We're withdrawing from all your cases. Daniel's knees buckled. The back exit of the cathedral was supposed to be private. Clarissa didn't expect the dozen paparazzi waiting for her. Clarissa, how long have you been sleeping with your sister's fiancé? Any comment on being cut from the Sinclair Trust? Are you and Daniel in love? Flashbulbs exploded in her face as she ran for a waiting cab, her ruined makeup streaking down her face. The driver took one look at her and sighed. Where to, lady? She had no answer. Her apartment was leased under the family trust. Her credit cards were frozen. Even her phone was on the company plan. The cabbie's radio crackled. Breaking news about the Sinclair wedding scandal. Clarissa began to sob. My penthouse was blissfully quiet. I stood on the terrace, sipping a 25-year Macallan as the sun set over the city. Behind me, the muted television played continuous coverage of the day's events. Lena entered with an update. Daniel's been spotted at a motel near the airport. Clarissa hasn't been seen since leaving the cathedral. The Ashford stock dropped 63% today. I swirled my glass. And my sister's little art gallery? Landlord just served eviction papers. Turns out the building is owned by a Sinclair subsidiary. A notification popped up on my phone, a security alert from my Hamptons estate. Motion detected in the guest house. I smiled. Right on schedule. The guest house alarm triggered at 2:17 a.m. I watched the security feed from my bed as Clarissa stumbled through the door, still wearing her ruined maid of honor dress, her strappy heels dangling from one hand. She collapsed onto the couch, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Perfect. I muted the feed and went back to sleep. At precisely 7 a.m. I entered the guest house with 2 cups of coffee. Clarissa jerked awake, her smeared mascara giving her the look of a startled raccoon. She scrambled upright, the cheap motel-quality sheets twisting around her legs. "You look terrible," I said, handing her a cup. He stared at it like it might be poisoned. "Why are you?" "Drink it. You'll need the caffeine." I took a seat in the armchair across from her, crossing my legs. "The gallery is closed. Your apartment is being repossessed. Your name is currently a global punchline." I sipped my coffee. "How does it feel?" Clarissa's hands trembled around the cup. "Evelyn, please." "Please what?" I tilted my head. "Forgive you. After you spread your legs for my fiancé in my bed?" She flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then enlighten me." Clarissa's voice was barely above a whisper. "It started after Dad's birthday party. Daniel said he was worried about you, that you seemed distant. We kept talking, and then one night he showed up at my apartment drunk, saying he was having second thoughts about the wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "And you thought the solution was to fuck him?" "It wasn't." She cut herself off, breathing hard. He said he loved me. That marrying you was just for the merger. That he wanted to call it off but was afraid of what you'd do." I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a full, unguarded laugh that made Clarissa shrink back into the couch. "Oh, little sister." I wiped an imaginary tear. "You actually believed him?" Her face went pale. I pulled out my phone and played a new recording. Daniel's voice filled the room. "Relax, Chris, it's not like I'm actually in love with the sister. But if Evelyn ever gets too controlling, having Clarissa wrapped around my finger is a good insurance policy." The date stamp showed this was from 3 days before the Hamptons incident. Clarissa made a noise like a wounded animal. I pocketed the phone. "He played us both. The difference is I checked his play." Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't." I stood, straightening my silk robe. "You never think, Clarissa. That's always been your problem." I walked to the door before pausing. "Oh, and the guest house. You have until noon to vacate. Security will escort you out." The no-tell-motel smelled like stale cigarettes and regret. Daniel stared at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, his once perfect hair now greasy and unkempt. His phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, creditors, his now former friends. A new email notification popped up. Subject: immediate repayment required. Amount due: $2,850,000. The penthouse lease he'd co-signed. The cars. The private club memberships. All suddenly due in full. His hands shook as he dialed his mother. She answered on the first ring. "You're on speaker with the board." A chorus of angry voices erupted before he could speak. "Resign immediately or we'll sue for malfeasance." "How could you be this stupid? The Sinclair lawyers are tearing apart our..." Daniel hung up. For the first time in his privileged life he had nowhere to go. I expected Clarissa to beg. To scream. To throw something. I didn't expect silence. When I turned back she was just sitting there, staring at her hands with an eerie calm. "I deserved that," she said quietly. This was new. She looked up, her eyes red but clear. "But you didn't just do this to punish us. You could have ruined Daniel privately. You wanted the spectacle." A beat. "Why?" Finally, a halfway intelligent question. I smiled. "Because some lessons need an audience." The security team arrived at the door behind me. Clarissa stood without protest, but as she passed me she paused. "He'll come crawling back to you, you know. Once he's desperate enough." I adjusted my robe's sleeve. "I'm counting on it." "Mr. Ashford, you can't be here." The hotel manager's voice cracked as Daniel shoved past the concierge desk, his designer shoes scuffing against the polished marble. 3 days of sleeping in his car had left his tailored suit wrinkled, his usually perfect hair greasy under the lobby's chandelier light. I watched from the mezzanine, stirring my espresso slowly, savoring the way his gaze darted around the lobby like a cornered animal. Lena checked her watch. 72 hours. I expected him to last at least a week. Daniel's head snapped up when he spotted me. His bloodshot eyes locked onto mine, raw desperation twisting his handsome features. Evelyn. His voice echoed too loud in the hushed luxury of the lobby. Please, just 5 minutes. I took my time descending the staircase, the click of my heels measured, deliberate. Guests and staff froze, sensing the tension. A waiter nearly dropped a tray of champagne flutes. I stopped 3 steps from the bottom, forcing him to look up at me. You have 30 seconds. Daniel's hands flexed at his sides, his knuckles white. They froze my accounts. The firm revoked my partnership. My mother won't take my calls. 20 seconds. He choked. What do you want? A public apology? A press conference? I'll get on my knees right now if that's what it takes. I tilted my head, studying the sweat beading at his temple. Why would I want that? Because, his voice cracked. Because you chose me. You don't just throw away an investment like that. The lobby held its breath. I smiled. Daniel flinched. Oh, Daniel. I descended the final steps, close enough to smell the sour whiskey on his breath. You weren't an investment. You were due diligence. His breath hitched. I straightened his crooked tie, my voice low. Did you really think I wouldn't find the offshore accounts? The forged client signatures. His pupils dilated, just like they had when I'd first confronted him about his gambling debts months ago. I patted his cheek. The SEC has such interesting filing requirements, don't they? At that exact moment, every phone in the lobby buzzed. Mine displayed the alert first. Business Insider. SEC launches fraud investigation into Ashford Capital, whistleblower documents reveal. Daniel's phone rang, his mother's contact flashing on screen. He didn't move. I leaned in. You should answer that. I hear federal warrants are so inconvenient to sort out. His knees buckled. A bellhop caught him before he hit the marble. Security swarmed as Daniel started screaming. Not words, just guttural animal sounds of pure rage. He thrashed against the guards, his polished facade shattered. You bitch. You planned this from the start. I sipped my espresso as they dragged him toward the doors. No, Daniel. You did. The paparazzi's cameras flashed like lightning through the glass as he was ejected onto the sidewalk. His final humiliation captured in high definition. Lena handed me a fresh folder. The yacht repossession is scheduled for noon. I tucked it under my arm. Make sure the press gets a good view. As I turned toward the elevators, the lobby burst into hushed whispers. The story would be everywhere within the hour. And Daniel? He'd learn what happened when you played games with someone who wrote the rules. The private elevator to my father's office moved too slowly. I counted each floor number as it lit up, 18, 19, 20, my reflection staring back at me in the polished brass. The folder under my arm contained the final piece. Daniel's offshore account records, the forged documents, the trail that would bury the Ashford name forever. The doors opened directly into the executive suite. Father stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to me, watching the city below. You're late, he said without turning. I checked my watch. By 30 seconds. 30 seconds is all it takes for empires to fall. He finally turned, his sharp gray eyes assessing me. Did he cry? Not yet. I placed the folder on his desk. But he will. Father flipped it open, scanning the documents with practiced ease. The SEC moved faster than expected. I may have expedited their process. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Remind me never to play chess with you. The financial news channels played on mute across the office's media wall. Ashford Capital stock plummets 89%. Fraud charges filed against board members. Victoria Ashford resigns amid scandal. Father tapped one frozen image. Daniel's mother being escorted from her office by federal agents. She lasted longer than I expected. I took the seat across from him. She'll take a plea deal by week's end. And Daniel? Currently homeless. The last of his credit cards were declined this morning. I paused. He'll come crawling to you next. Father's smile was cold. I look forward to it. My phone buzzed with a security alert. Subject: Unauthorized access attempt, Hampton's estate. I enlarged the feed. Daniel stood at the gates, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder, arguing with the guards. Even through the pixelated footage I could see the desperation in his posture. Father peered at the screen. Predictable. Wait. I zoomed in. He's not alone. A black town car idled at the curb. The rear window rolled down just enough to reveal a familiar profile. Charles Whitmore, Father's longtime rival and Daniel's godfather. Now that was interesting. Father's expression darkened. Charles always did have terrible timing. I stood smoothing my skirt. Shall we see what deal they're offering? The Hamptons security team had detained Daniel at the gatehouse, but Charles strolled through like he owned the property, which in his mind he practically did. Robert. He spread his arms wide as we stepped onto the terrace. Still living like a king, I see. Father didn't offer his hand. Charles. I'd say it's a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie. Charles chuckled, unbothered. He looked exactly like the Wall Street titan he was. Silver hair, perfectly styled, custom suit worth more than most cars. Only the tension around his eyes betrayed his nerves. Daniel stood slightly behind him, his once confident posture broken. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Charles gestured to him. I think we can all agree young Daniel here has been punished enough. I arched an eyebrow. Have they added adultery to the federal sentencing guidelines? Daniel flinched. Charles waved a dismissive hand. A personal matter. I'm here about the business concerns. He leaned forward. Call off the SEC and I'll vote your way on the Berlin acquisition. Father didn't blink. Not enough. Then name your price. I stepped forward. The Whitmore shares in Sinclair Media. Charles laughed. Absurd. I pulled out my phone and played a new recording. Charles's voice clear as day. Of course we backdated the documents. The SEC will never. The color drained from his face. Father smiled. I believe my daughter named her price. Daniel finally found his voice. You set me up from the beginning? I turned to him, genuinely amused. Did you really think a junior partner with a gambling habit just happened to catch my eye? Charles grabbed Daniel's arm. We're leaving. But Daniel shook him off, his eyes wild. You ruined my life. Father finally spoke. No, son. You did that yourself. We just provided the rope. As security escorted them out, Daniel's screams echoed across the manicured lawns, not of anger anymore but of sheer, impotent despair. The morning after Charles Whitmore's humiliation, I found my father in the library, poring over century-old leather-bound ledgers instead of the digital dashboards that now controlled our empire. You're up early, I remarked, taking the chair across from him. He didn't look up from the yellowed pages. The past has a way of clarifying the present. He turned a fragile sheet, revealing a handwritten entry from 1987. Did you know the Whitmores tried to bankrupt us 3 generations ago? I read the corporate histories. I accepted the espresso Marcel brought in. But this wasn't just about settling old scores. Finally he closed the ledger. No. It was about proving you could finish what I started. The quiet admission hung between us. Outside, the Hamptons waves crashed against the shore with metronomic precision. I set down my cup. Who really sent the video? Marcus Lynn arrived at noon, his usual impeccable suit replaced by vacation casual linen shirt, dark sunglasses. He handed me a thumb drive. Took some digging, he said, accepting the iced tea a staff member offered. The video was uploaded through 17 proxy servers, but the original file. He tapped the drive. Came from your father's private server. I didn't react. And Daniel's financial leaks? Same source, different channels. He took a long drink. For what it's worth, the encryption was masterful. I only found it because I knew where to look. I slid an envelope across the table. Your usual fee, plus the villa in Sardinia you've been eyeing. He pocketed it without looking. You know, most daughters get jewelry for their birthdays. I smiled. Most daughters aren't me. I found father in the wine cellar, inspecting a 1945 Chateau Mouton Rothschild. Planning a celebration? I asked. He ran a finger along the bottle's dusty neck. This was your grandfather's. Saved it for. He trailed off. The right moment? He met my gaze. The necessary one. I placed the thumb drive on the tasting table between us. You orchestrated everything. No denial. No pretense. Just the quiet hum of the climate control system. Daniel was always going to betray you, he said finally. I merely ensured it happened on our terms. I leaned against the rack of 82 Bordeaux. The SEC investigation, the Whitmore leverage. All contingency plans. He set down the bottle. But the final move was always yours to make. The pieces clicked into place. How easily I'd accessed Daniel's financial records, how quickly the SEC had responded, why Charles had folded so completely. This wasn't just revenge. It was a test. And I'd passed. Daniel's final interview aired at 8 p.m. on CNBC. I watched from the penthouse as he sat hunched in a cheap studio, his once perfect hair now dull and overgrown. The cheer-in read, "Disgraced attorney speaks out. I was set up." The interviewer leaned forward. "Do you have any message for Evelyn Sinclair?" Daniel's hands shook. He knew. From the beginning. The merger, the wedding. His voice broke. It was all a trap. The interviewer pressed. "Any proof?" A long pause. Then quietly, "Joe." The segment cut to commercial. Lena muted the TV. His mother disowned him this morning. The Bar Association disbarred him an hour ago. I swirled my bourbon. Where is he now? Checked into a motel outside Newark. She checked her tablet. Paid for with the last of his cash. I nodded. Have a car sent. Take him to the airport. Lena blinked. You're letting him go? I smiled. No. I'm making sure he stays exactly where I can see him. Father's study at midnight. The safe behind the Rothko painting stood open, revealing a single manila envelope. He handed it to me without ceremony. The Whitmore shares. The Berlin acquisition. And my resignation letter. I froze. What? He sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. You've earned this company 10 times over this month. A tired smile. And God knows I owe you for cleaning up my mess. I opened the envelope. The papers inside named me CEO of Sinclair Holdings effective immediately. No conditions. No oversight. Absolute power. Father poured 2 fingers of whiskey. You'll do better than I did. For the first time in my life I had no words. He raised his glass. To the future. I clinked mine against his. To consequences. Outside, the city lights glittered like diamonds on black velvet. My empire now. My rules. The end.